What is a dark secret that you have? Story 1. Last year, I was hospitalized due to COVID. I had to be placed on a ventilator for 3 weeks, put into a medical coma, resuscitated multiple times, and came dangerously close to death throughout that period. My dark secret is that I wanted to die. At the time, I was going through a painful divorce and battling severe depression. I felt like my world had collapsed, and there was nothing left worth living for. In a way, I was almost relieved that a virus might end my life, something I didn't have the courage to do myself. I accepted the idea of death and didn't have the will to fight it. Everything changed during one night in my medical coma. The doctors didn't think I'd survive until morning, so they allowed my family to come and say their goodbyes. My mom, who raised me as a single parent and has always been my rock, came into my room. I could hear her voice, even in my unconscious state, telling me how much she loved me, calling me a fighter and begging me to keep fighting. That moment became my turning point. Hearing her words gave me the strength to choose life. From that night onward, my condition started to improve. It was a long and grueling recovery process, and I'm still on that journey today. But without that moment, without my mom's voice, I don't think I would have survived. I've told my mom how much her presence meant to me during that time, but I've never shared with anyone how ready I was to give up on life back then. If the hospital hadn't made an exception to their COVID protocols and allowed her into my room, I truly believe I would have let go. Story 2. One night, my childhood best friend came to visit me at my college dorm. He had plans to attend a party and bought cocaine and pills from some of the guys living on my hall. I remember being oddly impressed by how confident and charismatic he was while making the deals. Before he left, he told me not to tell his mother about what he was doing, but to let her know he loved her if something happened to him. It struck me as strange, but I brushed it off, thinking he had just developed a dark sense of humor since the last time we'd spent time together. I ignored the warning signs and let him leave. We had plans to meet up the next day, so I figured everything would be fine. But it wasn't. He crashed his car later that night, likely high and not wearing a seatbelt. He didn't survive. When his mother asked me what had happened, I chose not to tell her the truth. I didn't want her to know the darker side of what he had been involved in. I wanted her to believe it was a tragic accident, free of the pain that knowing the truth might bring. To this day, I've kept his secret. I live with the guilt of ignoring the signs that night, but I've held on to my decision to protect his mother from knowing the full story. Story 3. Years ago, when I was a teenager, I got a summer job at a grocery store. Coming from a poor family, I was desperate to help my mom afford food during the summer when we couldn't rely on school lunches. My mom made slightly too much to qualify for food stamps, so every little bit counted. If you've ever been poor, you know how tight things can get. The manager at the store was a complete jerk. 2 weeks into the job, he fired me for no real reason, saying, "I just don't like your personality." That was the first and only time we had ever spoken. I broke down in tears because my mom was counting on me to pay for groceries that week. When I told him that, he dismissed me as being dramatic. That day when I got home, I realized I still had a roll of markdown stickers in my pocket. These stickers were used to discount expired items. A plan formed in my head, and I copied the stickers onto sticky paper. That summer, I bought thousands of dollars worth of groceries at a fraction of the price. Technically, I paid for the items as I used the self-checkout and always paid cash. But I marked things like salmon fillets, racks of ribs, and expensive cheeses down to just a few dollars. I spread out my purchases across a dozen stores to avoid suspicion, never buying too much at once. I told my mom that I had received an academic scholarship, and that's how I was able to afford the groceries. She never questioned it. I never got caught, and I don't feel bad about it to this day. The statute of limitations has long expired, and in my mind, I did what I had to do to help my family survive. Story 4. When I was 13 or 14, about 32 years ago, I joined a program called Explorers, which was part of the Boy Scouts. The troop I was in worked alongside the local sheriff's department, giving us training and experiences that mirrored those of young police officers. We practiced at shooting ranges, rode along with officers, worked events, and even wore uniforms with handcuffs and radios. Every year we had a weekend event at a National Guard base, a kind of boot camp. Hundreds of kids from across the state attended, ranging in age from 13 to 17. We stayed in barracks, sleeping in large open rooms with rows of single beds, about 30 kids per barracks. At the time, I was a small kid, barely 4 feet 8 inches, and hadn't yet hit puberty. I was an easy target and got picked on a lot because of my size. One day during a break, I found myself being harassed by a group of older boys. At first it was just a few, but the situation quickly escalated. More kids joined in, and soon it felt like the entire room was focused on me. They pinned me down, dragged me to one of the beds, and handcuffed me. I fought as hard as I could, biting, clawing, and kicking, but I couldn't break free. The oldest boy in the group seemed to take charge, and they attempted to assault me with a broomstick. To this day, I don't believe they succeeded, though the details are blurry. I don't remember anyone coming to my aid. Maybe they got bored or someone interrupted. But eventually it stopped. Moments later, everyone was getting ready for the next event as if nothing had happened. I never told anyone, not the officers, not my parents, not my wife. It's something I rarely think about, and I don't feel like it has defined my life. But as I type this now, I can feel a flood of emotions surfacing. This is the first time I've ever shared this story with anyone. Story 5. I once planned an elaborate 2-year SUIC plan to make my exit as seamless as possible. The idea was to cut everyone out of my life, move to another state, and wait until people stopped calling. Once I felt they'd moved on, I'd take my life. The goal wasn't for people to grieve or miss me, it was for them to think, good riddance. The flaw in my plan was my mother. She never stopped checking on me. She'd call me daily and drive hours every month to visit. Every conversation ended with her saying, "Remember, I need you around and will always love you." Her words cut through my resolve like nothing else. Then my best friend started calling constantly, leaving voicemail after voicemail. Eventually, out of sheer annoyance, I picked up. His first words were, "Finally, you asshole, let's catch up." From then on, he called weekly just to check in. And then came the cat. My mom brought me a kitten, claiming it would be good for me. She had me see a therapist and a psychiatrist, who suggested getting an emotional support animal. That cat changed my life in ways I never expected. One night, I hit rock bottom. I started writing final letters to everyone I cared about. I poured out my apologies and my goodbyes, but when it came time to write my mom's letter, I broke down. When I wrote about taking care of the cat, I sobbed uncontrollably. I cried until I fell asleep at my desk. I woke up to my cat gently tapping me, chirping for his breakfast. That moment pulled me back. I didn't go through with my plan, and that cat became my lifeline. Today, he's still with me, and I love him more than anything. I'm a grown man who will drop everything to pet a cat because, to me, they're little angels. Nobody knows about this except my wife, my mother, and my therapist. It's my darkest secret and one of my most vulnerable memories. Story 6. When I was around 5 or 6, my mom had a friend who had 2 kids of her own. Her kids were a bit unruly, more defiant than malicious. But their mom wasn't the best parent either. One time while visiting their house, the kids were acting wild. Eventually, they settled down and we started playing. Then out of nowhere, they thought it'd be funny to run around naked. I was mortified, but also felt something I didn't understand at the time. At some point, their mom caught them. She dragged the older child, still naked, into the bathroom. Locked out, I could hear everything. The yelling, the crying, and the awful, unmistakable sound of her hitting her child. When the kid finally came out, she had bruises and a black eye. She quietly got dressed, and life carried on as if nothing had happened. That moment stuck with me. It was one of my earliest memories, and it shattered my understanding of what a parent could do to their own child. Story 7. I come from a very large family, so large that even now at 44, I don't know everyone. Back in high school in the early 90s, I had a normal teenage life. I met a girl on the swim team, and we started dating. After a few months, our relationship got serious, and eventually we became intimate. About a year into our relationship, she got pregnant, with twins. We were excited and nervous, but on the 8th month of her pregnancy, we discovered a shocking family connection. Her mother and my mother were first cousins, making us second cousins. The revelation sent our families into chaos. Everyone had an opinion, and the division was intense. But by then, we were deeply in love. We decided to stick together and got married. Despite the challenges, we built a life together. We had a happy marriage for about 12 years. But as we grew older, we started drifting apart. We eventually divorced, but we remained close friends for the sake of our daughters. I started my own business, bought her a house to live in peace with the kids, and got a home nearby. Even after the divorce, we co-parented with love and respect. Now our daughters are adults, and they love both of us equally. We may not be married anymore, but we'll always be family. Story 8. You know those horrifying stories where you hear about someone abusing a baby? I was that baby, and the abuser was my father. It wasn't just a one-time event. It happened throughout my entire childhood. Even worse, my mother knew. There were times when she walked in on it and simply turned around and left. She knew. We all knew. Unsurprisingly, I acted out as a child, which led to me being sent to therapy. The therapist was a family friend, and I told him the truth. He confronted my dad and offered to report it to the police, but also explained what could happen if I did. I decided not to go through with it, and the abuse continued. The assaults only stopped when I was 11, after I finally told my father it didn't feel right. He would occasionally attempt while drunk during my teenage years, and even apologize for what he'd done. But nothing changed until I met my wife and had my first child. That was the moment I realized I had to cut ties with my parents to protect my son. When I confronted my mother, she looked me in the eye and, for the first and only time, said she loved me. Then she told me she didn't believe me and that I should never come back. That was 5 years ago. Now, I'm living a life I never thought was possible. I have an amazing wife, the most perfect son, and a stability I never knew growing up. My father, who was a well-respected doctor, escaped accountability. I later learned he abused his own brother, and I worry about the vulnerable patients he treated over the years. The abuse has left its scars. I struggle with PTSD and violent, sad dreams. Doctors say my early trauma likely stunted my amygdala's development, leaving me prone to uncontrollable rage and anxiety. But I've worked hard to manage it, and despite everything, I've built a good life. I own my home, have a solid job, good credit, and most importantly, a family that loves me. There are moments when I wish I had parents to turn to celebrate my achievements or seek advice from, but I've come to realize they wanted me to fail, so no one would believe me. So to my parents, screw you. I'm thriving without you. Story 9. I grew up in Maryland, and when I was 16, something happened that still haunts me. My friends and I were driving home from a party. We were all intoxicated and sticking to back roads to avoid getting caught. That's when we came across an overturned Jeep. We pulled over, panicking as we assessed the scene. The driver had been crushed and was already dead, but the passenger was still alive, struggling to breathe. One of my friends pulled him out of the vehicle, but despite our efforts, he stopped breathing and died right in front of us. We were terrified. None of us wanted to call the cops because we were all underage and drunk. We argued about what to do and ultimately decided to leave the scene. When we got back home, one of my friends took responsibility and called the police, explaining everything that had happened. Here's the part that haunts me the most. The two people in that Jeep were the parents of a girl in my class. For the rest of high school, I couldn't stop thinking about that night. What if we had acted differently? What if we had called for help sooner? The guilt and regret still linger, and I often wonder if we could have changed the outcome if we hadn't been so scared of the consequences. Storytime, my ex-husband was an incredibly violent man. We were together for 6 years, during which he nearly killed me several times by strangulation. He raped me repeatedly, and one horrific incident left me naked, unconscious, and bleeding on the cold, dirty floor of our garage. It was our 2-year-old daughter who found me and woke me up. He had left me there to go fishing. One night, he punched me so hard in the mouth that my tooth went through my lip, leaving it loose. As he slept, I sat in the bathroom, staring at my reflection, cleaning myself up. The anger I felt toward him was overwhelming. In that moment, I grabbed his toothbrush and used it to scrub the toilet bowl in his bathroom, where the crusty urine stains and skids were. I rinsed it off just enough, put it back in the cup, and went to bed. I barely slept that night, waiting for his alarm to go off. When morning came, I watched him walk into the bathroom. He brushed his teeth after having a bong hit and went off to work like nothing had happened. Before leaving, he came into the bedroom to give me a goodbye kiss, but I pretended to be asleep. I hope he tasted his own filth all day. That small act of defiance was one of the few moments of satisfaction I had during that dark time. 3.5 years ago, I finally fled with our 2 beautiful children. Even though he continues to stalk and harass us, my children and I are together, happier and safer than we ever could have been with him. We're rebuilding our lives, and I am proud to say we are thriving despite everything he put us through. Story 11. When I was about 7 or 8, my best friend's mom passed away from cancer. She was a kind woman who volunteered at our school often, And after her death, the school held a small assembly for the classes she had helped. One day during recess, for reasons I can't remember, I got angry at my friend. I wanted to hurt them, so I said something unforgivable. At least I have a mom. I don't recall how they reacted, but they didn't retaliate. We remained friends for years after that, drifting apart naturally in high school. That moment, however, has stayed with me. I've never told anyone, not even my wife, because I feel deeply ashamed and remorseful about it. I think about it often and wonder how much pain my words may have caused. Fast forward nearly 2 decades, and that same friend is now married to my closest friend. I attended their wedding, but being there felt wrong. I couldn't shake the guilt of what I had said all those years ago. I have no idea if they even remember that incident. My close friend has mentioned that their spouse never talks about their mom and refuses to discuss anything related to her. It makes me wonder if my cruel words contributed to that silence. It's something I'll always carry with me. A reminder of how thoughtless words can cause lasting harm. Story 12. I dropped out of university halfway through my first year, but didn't tell anyone except my closest friends. Instead of staying home, I decided to travel around Europe, taking part-time jobs to fund my adventures. For 3 years, I lived a carefree life, coming home during holidays and keeping up the facade that I was still in school. When it came time to graduate, I told my family I had earned a brilliant IT degree. They were thrilled. I was the first in the family to attend university, so no one questioned it. I even put the fake degree on my CV, claiming I didn't attend the graduation ceremony. When I applied for my first job, I relied on the knowledge I gained during my brief time at university and my natural aptitude for the field. I aced the interview, using buzzwords and confidence to convince them I was a top-tier candidate. No one ever asked to see proof of my degree. I worked hard, learning everything I needed on the job, and spent 5 years moving up the ranks. By the time I applied for another position, I had enough experience to remove the fake degree from my CV entirely. Looking back, I'm amazed I got away with it. I wouldn't be surprised if others have done something similar, but I sometimes wonder how differently things might have turned out if someone had called my bluff. Story 13. This is a story I've never shared publicly before. I married my ex-boyfriend when he was dying to keep his parents from inheriting anything he owned. We met in school as teenagers. He came out as gay to me, trusting I would understand, and I confessed that I was bi and had feelings for him. We became a couple, and it was the best relationship of my life. We didn't break up because we wanted to, but because his family moved to South Korea. Time zones and distance made staying together impossible, so we ended things amicably. 10 years later, I was fresh out of university and working in finance when I ran into him at a local bar. At first, I thought I was hallucinating, but it really was him. Late puberty had transformed me so much that he didn't even recognize me. When he realized who I was, he hugged me and we kissed without saying a word. We talked all night, and he told me about his life after Korea. He'd come out to his parents and they'd rejected him completely, blaming him for being gay and trying to force him into arranged relationships with women. Eventually, he left Korea to escape their control. I wasn't ready for another relationship then, having just gotten out of one, but I let him stay with me while he got back on his feet. A few months later, he had a job and his own place, and everything seemed to be going well. Then one night, he called me in a panic. He was vomiting blood and I rushed him to the hospital. After weeks of tests, he was diagnosed with stomach cancer. I was with him every step of the way through treatments, scans, and chemo. Nothing worked. Finally, the doctors told us there was nothing more they could do. By this time, his parents were aware of his diagnosis, but they used it as an opportunity to double down on their hatred, blaming his illness on his sexuality. He was devastated but resolved to ensure they wouldn't benefit from his death. A week later, we got married at the courthouse, holding hands with 2 strangers as witnesses. It was the happiest day of my life, despite the circumstances. He wrote a will disinheriting his parents, and for the next 5 months, we lived as a married couple. I tried to give him all the experiences he'd missed, going on dates, introducing him as my husband at my company Christmas party, and simply being together. When he passed away, it was peaceful. I held his hand all night, knowing it was the end. In the morning, I wrote to everyone he knew, letting them know he was gone. At the funeral, his parents showed up. They didn't know we had married, and when I was called up to speak as his husband, they were furious. At the reception, they confronted me, cursing me out, but my father and brother intervened and removed them. It's been 3 years now. I've only recently started dating again because I know it's what he would have wanted. Even now, I carry the memories of those final months with me. Despite the pain, being there for him was the greatest privilege of my life. Story 14. I haven't felt a single grain of happiness in years. I keep this to myself because I don't want my family or the people around me to know. I avoid conversations about myself, choosing to stay quiet and detached. But the truth is, it's dark and unbearably lonely. Even when I'm surrounded by people, I feel completely alone. I had good things in my life once, people I loved deeply and opportunities I cared about, but I let my own inner chaos ruin it all. Since then, every day has felt like something I just need to survive. I used to laugh at those movie scenes where someone falls apart after losing the love of their life, spiraling into a pit of takeout boxes and sadness until everything magically resolves by the end. Real life isn't like that. Love is so intricate, like an organ you carry inside yourself. When it's gone, there's no quick fix. I still feel her presence, like phantom limbs, her legs brushing against mine, sinking into the couch together, the smell of her skin. I'd give anything to have just one more day of that, to experience it all again. If someone offered me a choice between reliving that for a day or taking $1,000, I'd choose her every time. Now there's no happiness, just distractions and an overwhelming sense of loss. If I've learned anything, it's this. Don't give up on a good thing. Don't let insecurities or self-doubt destroy something worth holding on to. Story 15. In high school, I saw the school counselor weekly. She was terrible, belittling my experiences and supporting the people who hurt me instead of helping me. I wasn't alone in this. There was a small group of us who also saw her, bonded by our shared frustration and disappointment in her. The counselor was infamous for her dismissive attitude. She'd tell us things like, "That's not bad enough to get anyone involved," or "Other people have it worse." Her job was to help, but she consistently refused to take action, leaving us all feeling unheard and unsupported. The breaking point came when a sophomore girl, who had been seeing her for months, revealed that she was being physically and sexually abused by her parents. She begged the counselor for help, but as usual, nothing was done. Desperate and out of options, the girl went to the police herself. A rape kit and evidence from her bruises confirmed her story, leading to the arrest of her parents. The news reached the school board before the press. The counselor resigned in shame, and the principal followed suit, claiming to need time to reevaluate her position in education. Even though the counselor was gone, the damage she caused lingered. Too many people in my grade have died, either from drugs or by their own hand. While I take some solace in knowing she no longer has responsibility over anyone's well-being, it's bittersweet. For so many of us, her failure to do her job came too late to fix. I just hope her replacement listens. That small hope is all I can cling to as I reflect on the damage caused by someone who should have been there to help. Story 16. My dad passed away 10 years ago when I was 15. 7 years later, a family friend who worked closely with him revealed a secret. My dad had a mistress for many years while still married to my mom. According to the friend, my dad loved my mom as the mother of his children, but considered this other woman the love of his life. The woman passed away 2 years before my dad, so I never got the chance to meet her. To this day, I'm the only one in my family who knows about this, and I have no intention of telling my mom or older brother. Even though I love my mom and understand the betrayal, I can't help but see why it might have happened. When I was about 1 or 2, my dad had to move to another city for work, a 7-hour drive from home. He asked my mom to move the family there, but she refused for reasons that seemed trivial. For nearly 14 years, he worked there Monday to Friday and came home every weekend. He was also the sole breadwinner, supporting our family while my mom stayed home. I believe he chose not to divorce her to give us a stable, normal life. I can understand how lonely and isolated he must have felt during those years. This secret weighs heavily on me, but I've come to terms with it as part of my dad's humanity, flawed but deeply complex. I'll carry this knowledge alone, as it's not something I ever want my mom or brother to know. Story 17. For a year, I lied every day to my parents about going to work in college. I faked everything, editing screenshots of grades, creating fake report cards, and researching class material to keep my stories straight during dinner conversations. I didn't have a car, so during the winter, I'd stay outside for up to 8 hours to avoid being caught. I made money by boosting in League of Legends, a video game I was good at, which allowed me to afford things and keep my parents from questioning my finances. The pressure to succeed, both from my family and myself, was crushing. School wasn't for me, but instead of admitting that, I created an elaborate lie. Over time, the weight of it all led me into deep depression. Eventually, my dad discovered the truth when he asked for my college papers to reduce his taxes. I couldn't provide them, and the lie unraveled. I confessed everything, that I hadn't been in college or working for an entire year. To my surprise, my parents didn't kick me out. Instead, they took me to our family doctor, who prescribed medication for my depression. They also supported me by paying for a therapist, whom I still see once a month, 7 months later. I thought my family would give up on me, but they didn't. Today, I have a full-time job, bought my first car, and am looking for an apartment, though the prices are overwhelming. I'm incredibly grateful to my friends, siblings, and parents for standing by me through everything. And I'm thankful for myself for not giving up, even when it felt like the darkest times would never end. If you're struggling, don't give up. Seek help. People might surprise you with their kindness and support, and one day you'll see the light at the end of the tunnel. Life is worth living. Keep going. Story 18. When I was a kid, my dad used to talk in his sleep. I didn't think much of it at the time, but later he had to go to rehab. I'd ask my mom why he couldn't come home, and she'd say, he has to stay at the rehab with his friend. When I asked what rehab was, she told me, it's a place for people to get better. My young brain interpreted that as him just hanging out with a friend. Fast forward 10 years, and I learned the truth. My dad was a drug addict. My mom used to find him passed out on the bedroom floor while I was at school. The drugs, I assume, were why he talked in his sleep, sometimes full-on arguing with himself. Back then, I was only in the first grade, maybe even younger. While he's not on drugs anymore, things haven't improved much. He's been in a wheelchair since before I was a teenager, and now he's emotionally abusive to both my mom and me. He starts fights over anything and everything, keeping us in a constant state of stress. Financially, things are tough, mostly because of him. He refuses to rest until my mom takes him to the hospital for every minor ache or discomfort, draining money we don't have. He doesn't see that he's the reason we have to live so carefully. My allowance, for example, doesn't even come from my parents. It comes from my aunt. Even though he's no longer using drugs, the damage they cause lingers in different ways, affecting all of us. Story 19. I don't tell the woman I live with about a lot of the problems I handle. She tends to get very worked up, worrying herself sick over even small issues, so I deal with them quietly behind the scenes. 2 years ago, we replaced the roof on our house. While working on it, I found some rotted planks and a few other concerning issues. If I'd told her, she likely would have convinced herself that the entire roof was about to cave in. Instead, I replaced all the bad wood and reassured her it was just a cosmetic fix. 4 years ago, we hired professionals to complete major structural repairs under the house. The work was thorough and resolved the problem permanently, but she still believes it's only a matter of time before the house becomes unsafe again. I do the same when it comes to my health. Earlier this year, I had kidney stones, but I told her it was just an upset stomach. Right now, I have shingles, but she thinks it's a minor rash. If I were honest about these things, her anxiety would skyrocket and she'd ask endless questions, making it harder for me to manage the situation. Hiding the truth isn't ideal, but it keeps her calm and allows me to focus on solving problems without added stress. Sometimes it feels like the best way to keep the peace and protect her from unnecessary worry. Story 20. I was about 10 years into my career as a long-haul truck driver. Over the years, I'd seen plenty of accidents, some truly horrific, and even been in a few myself. But there's one I'll never forget. It was about 10 o'clock at night, with a clear sky and bright moonlight. I was heading home with about 100 miles left to go, driving along a winding, isolated highway through the woods. Around a bend, I saw tire tracks leading off the road. They looked old, but something nagged at me, telling me to stop and check it out. I pulled over, grabbed my flashlight and my pistol, because out in the middle of nowhere, you never know what you'll run into. I followed the tracks down a steep ravine and found an 18-wheeler, crushed and crumpled like a tin can. It had tumbled down the hill and was lying on its side, with a small fire burning near the cab. I started to back away, fearing the fire might reach the gas tank. I assumed no one could have survived the crash anyway. But then I heard it, a man's voice calling for help. I rushed to the cab and found the driver pinned inside. Metal and glass were crushing his body, and he was bleeding badly. He was trapped so completely that there was no way to get him out. That's when I saw the gasoline, glistening in the moonlight, slowly spreading toward the fire. It was only a matter of time before the fire reached the gas. There was no stopping it, no saving this man. He realized it too. His eyes locked onto mine, wild with terror, and he begged me to kill him. He didn't want to burn alive. I had my pistol tucked into the back of my pants. I pulled it out and raised it, but I couldn't do it. I grew up reading the good book, believing in God's commandments, and I just couldn't take his life. My hands shook as the man screamed, pleading for me to end his suffering. "Please, God, just kill me. I don't want to die like this." And then the gasoline ignited. Everything in me screamed to run, to escape the horrific scene. But something held me there. If I couldn't save him, at least I wouldn't let him die alone. So I stood there frozen, watching as the flames consumed him. I listened to his screams until they stopped, the fire crackling in the quiet night. I stayed there until the sun rose. Then I climbed back up the ravine, called in the accident over my radio, and drove the rest of the way home to my wife and 6 kids. I never told anyone what happened. I kept it bottled up for 40 years. I never explained to my wife why I woke up screaming in the middle of the night or why I struggled so much with my faith. I carried the guilt alone, guilt for not saving him and guilt for being relieved it wasn't me. One night, decades later, I was driving with my youngest daughter, who was an adult by then. For no reason at all, I told her the story. Maybe the night reminded me of that terrible one so long ago, but the words just spilled out. I expected her to hate me, to see me as a coward who let a man burn. But instead, she cried for me. When we stopped the car, she held me as I cried too. It was the first time I'd let myself feel that pain with another person. Now I'm an old man, and I don't know what will happen to me when I die. I still carry that guilt and always will, not just for watching that man burn, but for being so grateful it wasn't me. Story 21. One day in early high school, I went to a dentist appointment and realized I needed to use the bathroom. At this office, you had to ask the front desk for a key to the restroom. I grabbed it, went to the bathroom, and did my business. But when I flushed, the water level started rising, and it didn't stop. I stood there frozen in panic. As the water spilled over the edge of the toilet onto the floor, I had no idea what to do, so I bolted. I dropped the key off at the front desk, and just as I did, the dentist called me back to the chair. As I sat there, my heart pounding, the dentist was working on my mouth when a receptionist came in, announcing that the bathroom is flooding, there's water everywhere. The dentist left the room to check it out, leaving me mortified. By the time he came back, I was red-faced and sweating, terrified he'd figured out I was the culprit. Then he started casually explaining how a toilet works, how it can clog and overflow if certain parts malfunction. I couldn't tell if he knew it was me and was messing with me, or if it was just a coincidence. The appointment finally ended, and I braced myself as I walked out of the room, expecting someone to stop me or call me out. But no one said a word. I passed by the bathroom, which was now blocked off, water flowing down the stairs to the first floor. I left the office as fast as I could, completely unpunished. To this day, I don't know if anyone realized it was me, or if they genuinely thought it was the toilet's fault. Either way, I got away with it, and I'm not complaining. Story 22. I was relentlessly bullied by twin sisters for years. From elementary school through the first year of high school, we were in the same classes, rode the same bus, and lived in the same small town. No matter how hard I tried to be nice to them or avoid them when they were having a bad day, it didn't stop. The bullying got so bad that I'd feel physically sick just waiting at the bus stop. I even thought about ending my life because of how miserable they made me. During our first year of high school, we went on a field trip to a mountain park. After some activities, we had lunch on top of a tall hill overlooking the park. One of the sisters and her friends wandered closer to the edge of the cliff. While they were laughing and goofing around, she turned her back to the drop. I watched as her sandal got caught in a loose branch on the ground. She lost her balance and fell off the cliff. It took her friends a few moments to realize what had happened. I stood there silently watching the whole thing, saying nothing. She was badly injured and had to leave school for the rest of the year. I remember feeling a twisted sense of satisfaction, especially seeing her sister cry on the bus ride home. I thought about all the times I'd cried because of them, and for once felt like the universe had evened the score. Even though I didn't cause her fall, I've always felt guilty for taking pleasure in her pain. When people asked me if I saw what happened, I lied and said I hadn't seen anything. I couldn't bring myself to admit that, deep down, I had secretly hoped she'd been hurt. It's a memory that still makes me feel conflicted to this day. Story 23. My ex and I share joint custody of our two beautiful boys. One day she decided to take them to her husband's brother's house, where they had a large, aggressive pit bull. I don't have an issue with pit bulls as a breed, but this specific dog had a history of being dangerous. Unfortunately, my son tried to pet the dog and was attacked. The injuries weren't life-threatening, but looked terrible. Two puncture wounds, one under his chin and one just above his eyelid. The doctors at our local ER were too nervous to treat the wound near his eye, so they decided to airlift him to Little Rock's Children's Hospital. Thankfully, my son was incredibly lucky. He only needed a few stitches, and there was no lasting damage to his eye. While my son rested, I approached my ex's in-laws to discuss the situation. I told them I understood it was an accident, but that since my sons visited their house regularly, I wanted the dog put down to ensure it never happened again. They agreed, and I left the matter in their hands, trying to remain as calm and reasonable as possible. 2 weeks later, I called to follow up, only to be told to F off. They refused to euthanize the dog and insisted I had no right to stop my kids from visiting their house. A few weeks after that, I drove by their house on my way home and saw my son's stepdad outside. I knew my ex was at work, so I called her to check where my boys were. She told me they were at the house with him. Furious, I turned around and drove back. As soon as I got out of my truck, their pit bull came charging at me, barking and trying to bite. I managed to get onto their porch and shut the gate to keep the dog away. At this point, I was livid. I stormed into their house and the stepdad froze when he saw me, holding his baby while looking terrified. Ignoring him, I went straight to my kids' room, grabbed my boys and told him he would never watch them again. I carried them to my truck, and as I shut the door, the pit bull jumped on me again, growling and snapping. I shoved the dog off and kicked it to protect myself. That's when the stepdad, his brother, the dog's owner, their other brother and their dad came out of the house surrounding me. They threatened me, saying they had every right to shoot me, and one of the brothers said he was going to beat me up and then call the cops. I locked my truck, stared them down, and told them they better hurry and call the cops and an ambulance if they wanted to take it further. Thankfully, they backed off, and I was able to drive my boys home. That incident was the final straw for me. I contacted the sheriff to report the dog, but he told me the prosecuting attorney had dropped the case. I later found out from a family friend who works at the courthouse that the prosecuting attorney was having an affair with the stepdad's mom. Now, I'm left with thousands of dollars in medical bills, threats from their family, and a constant fear for my son's safety. Despite everything, I'm doing everything I can to ensure my boys are never in harm's way again. This fight isn't over. Story 24. When my ex-wife became pregnant with triplets, I was overjoyed. But she only wanted one child and proposed reducing the pregnancy to just one baby. I wanted to keep all three, and after many emotional discussions, we compromised on keeping two. She went through with what's known as a reduction, aborting the third embryo. While I respected her right to make decisions about her body, I was consumed by grief over the child we didn't keep. That grief turned into depression, and I struggled to show love the way I used to. This led to tension and frustration in our marriage, and eventually we split up. However, we never told anyone the real reason for our divorce. Instead, she fabricated a story that I had cheated on her, a lie that many people, including our friends, believed. I tried to stick to saying that we had grown apart, but her story gained traction. As a result, I lost friends and became the target of judgment, all while carrying the burden of grief over the abortion. What makes it even harder is knowing which of my twins wouldn't have been born if my ex had gotten her way. The doctor pinpointed the highest placed embryo as the one to be aborted, which would have been my second-born child. Today, he's a delightful, loving little boy. While I treasure both of my children, I still feel a deep sadness for the third baby we never met. Balancing this grief with the unfair stigma of infidelity has been incredibly isolating. I'll never tell my twins they once had a triplet, and I continue to carry the truth alone, silently mourning a child while enduring the false accusations that clouded my reputation. Story 25. My former sister-in-law once admitted to me that she felt she had married the wrong last-name boy. At first, I thought it was just a lighthearted comment, but it became clear how serious she was when she began sending explicit messages, confessing she fantasized about me, and eventually sending topless photos. She was undeniably attractive, and any other man might have jumped at the chance for a casual fling. But this was family. I knew how devastating it would be if anything happened, so I tried to handle the situation carefully. I didn't want to offend her or cause a family scandal. One day while my wife was at work, she came by for coffee and tried to seduce me. I was both incredibly tempted and terrified, trying to slow things down without hurting her feelings. Eventually, she asked if I would ever consider leaving my wife for her. That's when I knew I had to be direct. I let her down gently but firmly, making it clear that nothing could happen between us. Thankfully, she wasn't angry. Instead, she was disappointed and confided in me about her struggles. I extended friendship and support rather than treating her like a pariah. Over time, she worked through her feelings, and she and my brother eventually divorced after mutual infidelities. This happened about 5 years ago, and I only told my wife a few months ago. She understood why I waited so long to share. She agreed it could have been a disaster if the family had found out at the time. Today, no one in the family knows about her advances, and there's no benefit in revealing it now, especially with children involved. Looking back, I'm grateful I didn't give in. The fallout would have been catastrophic, and while I still carry the memory, I know I made the right choice for everyone involved. Story 26. When I was younger, my mom had a very successful business selling clothes and owning several coffee shops. It was a proper franchise. But in 2008, the recession hit, and we lost everything. We went from living in a 3 to 4 bedroom house to carrying our clothes in suitcases and sleeping in a car. We tried to get hotels, but they turned us away. My mom, who never drank before, started drinking, and at just 8 years old, I would tuck a blanket around her as she slept. Despite it all, she gave me a wonderful childhood. We eventually befriended an older woman who owned several car dealerships. She was one of my mom's best customers before the recession, always buying designer clothes like Gucci and Dolce & Gabbana. When we needed a place to stay, she offered us a room in her massive mansion. It was unreal: gated grounds, security, multiple farmhouses, and luxurious accommodations. She treated us kindly, like family. When I was sick, she would bring me milk and cookies in bed. We stayed there a few times, and it was incredible every visit. But then suddenly we stopped seeing her. I missed her for years. Later, I found out the truth. She was the head of a mafia-style family involved in a massive drug operation. Her mansion's gatehouse was burned down not long after one of our visits, and the police discovered drugs being grown in the farmhouses. However, she avoided suspicion by claiming she was renting them out. Her son, whose army patches she used to give me as a kid, was killed while smuggling drugs out of Afghanistan, allegedly executed when he was caught. The most shocking revelation was that she befriended my mom and me not just out of kindness, but to use us. She wanted my mom to act as a motherly figure, to transport her money to Asian and Mediterranean countries for tax purposes. My mom, of course, refused. Even the coldness in her mansion had an explanation. She was stealing heating from the grid, though I never fully understood how that worked. Looking back, it's surreal. As a child, I saw her as a sweet, grandmotherly figure who gave us comfort in a tough time. Now I see her as a criminal mastermind. Story 27. In high school, I was incredibly shy. People often overshared with me because they assumed I wouldn't tell anyone. One day, a girl I sat with at lunch, who had been having trouble at home, dragged me into the bathroom and broke down crying. She told me her mom's boyfriend was coming into her room and assaulting her. Her mom knew but didn't care, and even acted like it was her fault. She was having a panic attack and said she didn't know what to do. She told me that if she got pregnant, she would kill herself. She begged me not to tell anyone, and I promised her I wouldn't. But I couldn't keep that promise. I didn't want to tell a teacher or my mom because I was scared it would trace back to me and make things worse for her. So, during my free period as a library aide, I wrote a fake note. I made it look like two people gossiping, writing things like, "Did you hear about fake name? Apparently she's pregnant, and it's her mom's boyfriend." Then I handed the note to the librarian saying I'd found it in the stacks. The librarian freaked out and reported it. The next day, the school was buzzing. The mom's boyfriend had been arrested, and the mom admitted she knew but didn't know how to handle it. My friend was removed from her home and sent to live with her biological dad in another state. I never heard from her again, but I saw updates on her Facebook months later. She seemed to be doing okay, but was struggling with mental health issues. I still have mixed feelings about what I did. I know I might have disrupted her life, but I also couldn't sit back and do nothing. I hope in the long run, it was the right choice. Story 28. I joined the military at 17, and during my 11-month AIT training, we were allowed weekend passes off base. Large groups of us would rent hotel rooms together, often cramming 6 to 8 people into one room. That's how I ended up sleeping on the floor one night after everyone got drunk at the bars. I was wearing my summer PT uniform, loose t-shirt and shorts with built-in mesh underwear. Most girls cut the lining out, but I didn't bother. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to a hand over my mouth and the weight of a 6'3" male soldier on top of me. His boxers were around his knees and my shorts had been pulled to the side. He was trying to push past the mesh lining, but I couldn't breathe, and my struggles barely moved him. Then out of nowhere, someone started banging frantically on the hotel room door, screaming about looking for their girlfriend. The guy on top of me jumped up, pulled his pants on, and was gone before anyone else in the room fully woke up. It turned out the man at the door had the wrong room. He didn't know anyone inside. But that drunken stranger, along with the mesh lining of my shorts, saved me from being raped that night. I never learned who the man at the door was, but I'm grateful to him. He didn't find his girlfriend, but he unknowingly protected me from something horrific. Cheers to him, wherever he is. Story 29. This isn't as dark as some other stories, but it's something I've kept secret and felt guilty about for years. When I was a kid, my mom worked as a cleaning lady for a well-known lawyer in our area, who I'll call Bob. He had the picture-perfect suburban life, a wife, kids, and a nice home. My mom was exceptional at her job, making everything shine, and Bob was always full of praise for her and us kids. Sometimes my mom had to bring me and my younger sister along to work, especially when my dad wasn't in a state to take care of us. While my mom cleaned, we'd spend hours doing homework, playing, or keeping each other occupied. One day when I was 9 and my sister was 7, we were playing hide and seek in Bob's office. I was hiding under his desk when 2 pairs of legs entered the room, one in heels and the other in trousers. I froze, realizing I wasn't supposed to be there. I peeked out and saw Bob making out with a woman who wasn't his wife. I clamped my hand over my mouth to avoid making a sound because I didn't want to get in trouble. I knew what cheating was. Being Hispanic and having toxic relatives, I'd seen it plenty growing up. Once they left, I quietly rejoined my sister and changed the game so we wouldn't be separated again. Months later, we were back at Bob's office because my dad was too drunk to watch us. This time, I entertained my sister by telling her fantasy stories under one of the desks. While we were there, Bob came in with another woman. They started clearing a desk and saying inappropriate things, so I knew we had to move. My sister had her blanket with her, so I wrapped her in it and whispered that we were silent knights on a quest to get back to our queen, our mom, through the back door of destiny. We crawled quietly out of the room as Bob cranked up some music, and thankfully, we made it to my mom without being seen. My sister thought it was all part of the game. Later that night, my mom asked us to grab some cleaning supplies and she got to work. Bob and his companion left looking neat and composed, and he gave my mom an extra $50. At the time, I thought that was just a tip for a job well done. Years later, my mom told me the whole story. Bob was a serial cheater who used his office for play dates with various women. On those days, he would pay my mom extra and ask her to bring me and my sister along. The real reason? He wanted us on camera so security would focus on us and not on his office, which conveniently had its cameras down whenever he had one of his guests. His wife never found out, but his kids started noticing something was off. His youngest daughter was in my class and seemed clueless at the time. I've thought about telling them what I know, but I doubt they'd ever believe me. I'm just glad my mom doesn't work for him anymore and isn't stuck cleaning up his messes, both literal and figurative. This secret has stayed with me for years. I know it's not my place to say anything, but part of me wishes I could expose him for the sake of his family. For now, though, it's just something I carry silently. Story 30. A few years ago, I was a college student at Murray State University, living in a dorm with a shared bathroom setup. Our bathroom connected 2 dorm rooms, so 4 people shared a single toilet and shower. One night in November, while I was using the bathroom, I noticed too late that the water in the bowl was unusually low. After finishing my business, I flushed and saw that one stubborn piece just wouldn't go down, no matter how many times I tried. I started panicking. I didn't want to be the roommate who left a mess in the shared bathroom. I looked around desperately for a solution and spotted an empty Gatorade bottle. Using some questionable science and physics, I squeezed the bottle to create a vacuum and successfully sucked up the offending item. But now I had another problem. I was holding a Gatorade bottle with a piece of poop inside, and my roommate was about to come back any second. I heard the door rattle as he started unlocking it. Instead of hiding the bottle like a normal person, I opened the dorm window and dumped it outside. We were on the 6th floor. The moment I let it drop, I heard confusion and commotion from below. Horrified, I slammed the window shut and, for some reason, started doing jumping jacks. My roommate walked in, saw me working out, and thought nothing of it. To this day, I have no idea who was below or what they thought happened, but I still feel a mix of guilt and disbelief that I actually did that. Story 31. I've never told anyone this, but I often wish my drug-addicted cousin would overdose and pass away. I feel like a terrible person for even thinking that. She's been a drug addict for as long as I can remember. She has 2 wonderful kids, but when she had custody of them, she constantly left them at my house under the pretense of going to work when she was really doing drugs. She was always late picking them up, and they often ended up staying the night. Eventually, she abandoned them entirely with their grandparents. Thankfully, they now have a stable and loving home with their grandparents, and I've worked hard to maintain a good relationship with them. The only good thing she ever did was leave the kids with people who truly care for them, but she continues to manipulate and hurt them from a distance. She fights for legal visitation rights only to tell them they're a burden when she does see them. She forgets their birthdays, rarely shows up for holidays, and when she does, it's always a dramatic and emotionally scarring event. She's stolen from nearly everyone in the family, including our late grandmother. Even after Grandma passed, she used her stolen credit card until we shut the account. She's been in and out of rehab and jail 3 times and has broken our family apart with her manipulative, narcissistic behavior. I've tried to help her many times, only to get burned every single time. My heart wants to believe her every time she says she's ready to change, but it never happens. Addiction is a disease, and I understand that. But it's clear the drugs have completely consumed her life, and my aunt only enables her. At this point, I've gone no contact with her and my aunt. A part of me feels like if she were to die, we could all finally move on and heal. The hurt would still be there, but it would be different. It's a terrible thought because I don't want her to die. I want her to get better. But after years of trying and seeing no change, I know it's unlikely. I feel conflicted and guilty, but deep down I just wonder when the day will come when she's gone. And I'm not even sure if I'd feel sad when it happens. It's a horrible thing to admit, but it's how I feel. Story 32. This is something I've never shared with anyone before. A few years ago, I was in a very dark place, lonely, depressed, and disconnected from the world. During that time, I sought out encounters with workers, but one stands out above all the rest. I met this woman through a Backpage ad. We arranged to meet, and after going to her room and conducting our business, something unusual happened. She kissed me. That small act of intimacy led to us exchanging real phone numbers and agreeing to see each other more often. We started meeting regularly. While she still got paid, our dynamic became more personal. We would cuddle, give each other massages, watch TV, and talk about life. It felt like a genuine connection, despite the transactional nature of our relationship. As we got to know each other better, she opened up about her heroin addiction. Sometimes before our meetups, she'd ask me for rides to sketchy houses to get her fix. Other times, she'd excuse herself to shoot up in our hotel room. There were moments when she would meet with me simply because she needed money to support her habit. Eventually, she left the area to go to rehab, and I started a new chapter of my life. I dove deeply into religious study, got married, and turned my life around. We haven't spoken in years, but I know she overcame her addiction and is now in a happy relationship. She even started a podcast about addiction and recovery. I'm genuinely happy for her because she's a kind person who deserved better than the life she was living at the time. But despite my current life and faith, I can't shake the guilt I carry about that time. I supported her addiction, whether directly or indirectly. I picked her up from her boyfriend's house at one point, knowing what we were going to do. I participated in a cycle of behavior that was harmful to her and in some ways to myself. At the time, I convinced myself I was a good person. We enjoyed each other's company and she seemed happy to see me. But looking back, I know I was engaging in unethical behavior, even if I justified it to myself at the time. Now, as a religious person, that experience humbles me. It reminds me how easy it is to rationalize wrong actions when you lack clear boundaries. I realize how far I've come, but also how far I had fallen back then. I haven't spoken to her in years, though I used to check her social media occasionally to see how she was doing. I'm glad she's thriving, but the memories of those times still haunt me. They remind me to stay grounded and to never let myself slip into darkness again. Story 33. About 14 years ago, when I was 20, I had one of the strangest and most unsettling experiences of my life. It was late at night when I got a random call on the home phone. To this day, I have no idea how this woman got the number. I assume it was a wrong number. Anyway, this woman starts talking in a seductive voice and says she's masturbating. She doesn't seem to care that she doesn't know me. As the conversation goes on, she starts turning me on, talking about wanting to have a threesome. At that point in my life, I didn't have much going on. No job, no car, no girlfriend, no money, just time to waste. The idea of something exciting happening had me hooked. She tells me her boyfriend will come pick me up so we can meet up with her. When he shows up, he's alone. He explains that we have some time to kill before meeting her, so he drives us to a secluded spot to smoke weed. We get high and then he offers to perform oral on me. I immediately decline, saying, "Nah, man, I'm not gay." He then says, "Well, I've got some porno mags. Do you want to look at them and jack off?" At this point, I was still worked up from the phone call with his girlfriend, and I foolishly agreed. So there I am, in the middle of nowhere, in a car with a complete stranger, jacking off. Then he tries to touch me, and I shut that down quickly with another firm, "Nah." That's when reality hit me, hard. The post-nut clarity kicked in, and I realized how absurd and dangerous the situation was. I told him to take me home, but he kept insisting that his girlfriend would show up soon. He tried to convince me to stay, but I wasn't having it. Eventually, he agreed to take me back. Looking back, I don't know if the woman was ever real or if this was just a bait-and-switch situation. I'm grateful it didn't escalate further, but the whole thing could have ended much worse. I could have been assaulted or even killed. While I didn't do anything explicitly sexual with the guy, I still feel ashamed that I let myself get into that situation and even jacked off in the same car with him. It's one of the weirdest and most uncomfortable encounters I've ever had, and I've never heard from either of them again. Story 34. This happened recently, and it's still very fresh in my mind. I was staying at my mom's house for the weekend. She lives there with her boyfriend, and honestly, I have no complaints about him. My mom loves him a lot, talks about him all the time, and he's always been great. One day during my visit, my mom had a doctor's appointment that was going to last 3 hours. I considered going with her, but I decided against it because I wouldn't have been allowed in the room with her. Plus, I thought I could use the time to work on some college assignments. I did have a moment of hesitation because her boyfriend would get home before her, and as a young woman, the idea of being alone in the house with him made me a bit uneasy. But I trusted him and figured it would be fine. Around the time her boyfriend was supposed to get home, I turned off all the lights and went to my room so I wouldn't bother him. I don't think my mom told him I was home because a few minutes after he walked in, I heard the TV turn on, and he started watching porn. Loudly. My room is just a few doors down the hallway, so there was no mistaking what I was hearing. I was absolutely mortified. My heart was racing, and I didn't know what to do. I quickly plugged in my earphones, turned on a show at full volume, and stayed in bed pretending to be asleep. For the next 2 hours until my mom got home, I didn't move. I didn't want to confront him or make the situation awkward, especially since it seemed like he didn't know I was there. If he found out later, I'm sure he would have been just as embarrassed, and I would have pretended I didn't hear anything anyway. I haven't told anyone about this because it's just so awkward and uncomfortable, but it's been on my mind nonstop, and I wish I had just gone with my mom that day.